FME is a very large product and it has a lot of great features, functionalities, and just general configuration options. So we're hoping to go through a couple of those both on the FME desktop and server side. So hopefully this will be beneficial to advanced users all the way down to the users who've just started for the first time this week. So yeah, I guess without further ado, we'll get started. There we go. My name's Chris. I'm part of our customer solutions team. It's a team of two, and the other half of that is Sienna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sienna.
And yeah, so today we're obviously going to be presenting on FME best practices. So we'll go through a little bit of an agenda. What we will be covering today is going to be starting off with the FME desktop journey. So we'll talk about configuration and just some general authoring workspace tips. And then Sienna will take over and she'll talk about the FME server side of things. So talking more about capacity planning, managing resources, as well as some security configurations. We'll leave you off with some resources at the end, and you will definitely have access to these slides because we have a ton of links throughout. But at any point, feel free to shoot up your hand. We can hopefully address any questions as we're going along. So without further ado, we'll hop into FME Desktop, aka Workbench, and we'll talk about some configuration options. If you're installing FME Workbench for the very first time, this is something that is only going to be a consideration once you're installing your next build. So you can have multiple builds of FME Workbench installed on your machine. You just need to have a separate directory for that install. I typically like to have the directory that I install to be the build number, and that's the last 5 digits of the installer file. So it'll be B followed by 5 digits, and that'll tell you what build number you're running. The most important consideration here is if you are running with FME Server, please, please, please match the production version of your FME Server. You're definitely more than welcome to have a beta build on your machine if you want to run just for testing purposes or if there's a bug fix. That's when you'd want to have the beta and a separate install directory. When you upgrade FME Workbench and uninstall a previous build, it will keep that folder there. So you'll keep a retention of that previous build number. So for whatever reason, if you have to roll back and you can't find the installer, you can reach out to us and we can provide that to you. So all we need is that 5-digit code and we can pull any installer back for you. On the note of upgrading, we are not forward compatible. So we can't go back in time from 2022 down to 2019. The reason for that is transformers just might not exist there. It might be a brand new transformer. It might be a transformer version that's been updated. So we can't roll that back and automatically update that. On the other side, you can do backwards compatibility. So you can go from 2018 up to 2022, and you should expect things to just work as expected. We'll kind of go into that a little bit later as well. If you were to open up a workspace from a newer build in an older version, so say you're working with a beta build and you have a production server in FME 2022, this is the message you'll see. It's kind of informative that this is the transformer that's missing. You can go ahead and then re-add that if needed, but generally just work in the production server build and you'll be going through happy days. On the personalizing FME Workbench side of things, there's a lot of great options in FME options, and this is where we're going to dive into some configuration things. So first and foremost, in the FME options section, there are separate sections for Workbench, appearance, and toolbars and everything like that. One of my favorite ones is on the Workbench side of things, and it allows you to edit the reader feature type data types. So you can already do this with formats like Excel and CSV, but if you enable this in FME options just on that Workbench tab there, at the very bottom in reader and writer options, you have that ability to change the data types on the reader. So once you add that reader to the canvas, you can change those. So if you want a string to be a number or a date, that's how you can kind of do that inherently. On the appearance side of things, we introduced dark mode, I want to say 2020 or 2019-ish. So if you prefer working in a dark mode, obviously you have that available to you as well. Light mode is the default, but if you're also someone who has trouble distinguishing colors, we have a parameter for that as well. That's also in FME options. So if you're having a hard time seeing the differences between annotations or transformers and readers and writers, this is where you can enable that distinguishable colors parameter. We also have a ton of great options in the toolbar configuration. So the default configuration is kind of what you're looking at right now. It includes a lot of great information about adding bookmarks and annotations, but there's a lot of things that you might not necessarily use on there. I know I personally don't. I've configured this to use additional actions that are also listed just in the right-hand side there. So you can kind of expand based on the section that you're working on. So I like to do a lot of feature caching working with user parameters. So I've enabled those to be on my toolbar instead. So I don't have to go through a submenu. I don't have to go burying and looking through all these menus. It's right there on my toolbar available to me. So that's something that you might want to have a quick look through in case there is an action available that you can add there. It'll save you a few clicks. Go to the next one. Actually, I'll go one back before I go there. For FME options as well, if for whatever reason you change something and you don't like the modification that you've done, there's also that reset defaults option in the very bottom left-hand corner. So you can always roll back to the original state. So that's worth noting there. Okay. One more apparently. There we go. Okay, kind of the final piece of personalizing your FME experience is you can pull apart, you can tab windows, you can dock windows, you can kind of have it exactly formatted exactly how you want it. So I have my layout with the visual preview below, feature information on the left-hand side. That might be different from Sienna's, might be different from yours in the front row. So you can really pull things apart and make it exactly how you want it to be. If you're working with visual preview and you have a second monitor, you could have that docked off to the side and have it configured to show everything that you need as you're clicking through the objects. Same as the FME options, you have the ability to reset that window layout. So this is in a little bit of a different section. So if you're working off your single laptop monitor, or rather an external monitor with your laptop plugged in, and you unplug and suddenly a window has disappeared, you can reset this on View, Windows, and just at the bottom option is Reset Window Layout. So a lot of great options there. We'll get into some naming best practices and things like that. We're going to talk about this on the server section as well, but on the desktop side, since this is where you author connections, you create the connections and web services, it's very important to note it here. So when it comes to web services and connections, you want to make sure these have very meaningful names. Something like having the account name, the service, and the role is something that could be beneficial. And the reason for that is once you publish it up to FME server, you could have duplicates of that if you don't have a standard for your organization already. So it takes down a lot of maintenance on your FME server admins, and if for whatever reason you have to change a parameter on there, you only have to do it to one connection instead of like 5. On the note of web services, we provide a list of about 30 web services, and these are noted for demonstration purposes only. You can definitely use these as the default. They kind of run your own risk if you do that, though. We have seen them go offline, so something like Google Sheets happened, I want to say earlier in the year, in about January. They changed their client ID secret on us, so that was a default app that we had configured, and something changed. We didn't detect it right away, so it could have knocked out someone's production system. So if you create your own client ID and secret, you will have complete control over this. It's completely in your domain. Your IT will be able to help you with this. It might just be faster and make sure everything keeps running in production. And again, things shouldn't change, but this is why we make that recommendation, and it's in the very first line of that documentation there. On the note of authoring workspaces, you can't really talk about best practices without talking about bookmarks and annotations. So this is, I think, the very first thing we talk about in best practices on our training as well. The ideal workspace is going to have annotations explaining what's happening in the workspace, similar to pseudocode if you're doing any Python work, except it's in a visual layout. Same thing goes for bookmarks. You can break the workspace down into logical sections, so you can just look at a glance what's happening in each area. Bookmarks also have a performance feature to them if you consider it that way. If you're working with visual preview and feature caching enabled, and you collapse a bookmark, it's only going to create a single feature cache on the output port. So you're not going to be creating a feature cache on every individual node on the canvas if things are collapsed in there. So if you work with visual preview, that's a great way to save some memory on your machine, as well as run workspaces a little bit faster. On the note of feature caching, this is generally an authoring only parameter that we suggest you use. So if you're building out the workspace for the first time and you need to see how the data is changing as the workspace goes along, that's where you'll have that on. But if you're running anything in production and you don't have it on an FME server, running in an automation or a schedule or something like that, turn feature caching off and you'll notice things run a lot faster. So the main benefit of annotations and bookmarks really are it makes the workspace just easier to maintain down the line. We'll get more into some more authoring tips. So when it comes to rejected features, obviously you're probably aware if you've run into any error messages, it's very obvious in the translation log in bright red text. It'll tell you exactly what's going wrong. You can filter for those in the top buttons of the translation log. So there's one for errors, warnings, and information. But there's also rejected feature information. So if you're using something like an HTTP caller, you could get some additional information from the response body. And the last note on this slide is for upgrading transformers. So this is where we'll get back into upgrading versions. Coming from a previous version into 2022, you might have the option to upgrade a transformer. This is done by just right-clicking on the transformer and selecting upgrade. This isn't really needed unless we've made a lot of noise about the transformer. So something like a statistics calculator will give you the option to upgrade that, and you could get a significant performance gain in there. But if we aren't making a lot of noise about it, typically just let it run and you should be good to go. And the last piece for FME Desktop is really preparing for collaboration. So this is where naming becomes even more important. If you're working with Workspace files that use the same name and you're just saving over top of them, you won't be able to make use of the next feature here, which is versioning and collaboration. So when you create your workspaces, try to append a date or a version number onto the end of it so you can make use of versioning and collaboration. We have a new feature in FME 2022 for compare and merge, and this allows you to look at two workspaces simultaneously, and you can see all the adds, modifications, and deletes on a workspace. It's a nice graphical interface where you can do all of that as you need. And at this point, pass it off to Sienna for FME Server.
Okay, perfect. So let's jump right into it and talk about capacity planning on FME Server. One thing you may have noticed if you've upgraded recently is now we have new job statistics available in FME Server right in the UI. And I'm just going to go over these job statistics and what they mean because it can be kind of confusing at first. First, we have elapsed time. This is the total time it takes to run a job from start to finish. But we also have CPU time, and that's the time that the machine is taking to process the job. CPU percentage this is the one where I think it's confusing because you would think CPU percentage is the amount of CPU you're using. However, it's not. It is CPU time divided by elapsed time. So what you're looking for here is a high number. You want to make sure that the time your job is running, the machine is actually processing it, and you're not waiting for data to arrive or you're having latency issues. So if you take a look at your FME Server jobs on this page, so this is the Workspace page, you might notice that some of your jobs have a very low CPU percentage. It might be worth taking a look at those jobs to see what they are processing and see if there's a way you can make them more efficient, maybe by moving your data and where it's stored. Another thing we have is peak memory usage. Now I know Don and Dale are saying we're using less memory. FME will still use a lot of memory. So these are some things that you might want to take a look at if you're consistently running out of memory on your FME server. You can schedule these jobs to run at a different time, perhaps when your server is more quiet. So take a look at that peak memory usage there and kind of see your most memory intensive jobs, and you can work around this through schedules. Next, we have job control or queue control. So basically, this is where your jobs are heading to, what engine they're heading to. So if you have only one engine, feel free to take a nap for the next 30 seconds while I talk about this. But if you have multiple engines, you might want to look into queue control. So this is sending your jobs to the correct engine. So for instance, you might have a distributed engine and you might have a special format that has access to that engine. You can send jobs to that particular engine. Or let's say you have quick running jobs. Let's say you're accessing an API and you need that data right away. You might want to save an engine for those types of jobs so you know that they are going to run quickly and efficiently on your server. You also might want to send jobs to CPU engines, and this is all something you can do using queue control within FME Server. Next, we have choosing a deployment architecture. Now, typically we see people start off with an express install, which works for most people. But as you grow FME Server within your organization, you might want to branch out a little into the other deployment architecture options. We have a link here on the slides, which you can go to afterwards, and kind of explains the pros and cons of different deployment architectures. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to cover them in this talk, but it is something that you may want to take a look at if you're running out of resources on your FME Server machine. Common questions I get asked all the time. what hardware do I need to run FME server? And the answer to that is, I don't know. It all depends on your jobs and what they're processing and how long things take. So this next slide will talk about where to look. So if you're purchasing FME server for the first time, take a look at your FME desktop logs. At the end of every single log, you will get job statistics. These job statistics will tell you how much memory and CPU usage and time these jobs take. So take a look at those jobs that you know use a lot of memory and take a lot of time. And with that, you can consider what kind of tech specs you need on your machine, because it can be quite different. I use APIs a lot, so I'm running quick jobs. Everything's done under a minute. I never see any memory usage. Well, I see some, but not a large amount of memory usage, where my colleagues that work with rasters and point clouds, they're consistently kind of running into these memory issues if they have small machines. So it's just something to note. As well, you can decide to scale up your hardware. The first place we see people wanting to scale is, you guessed it, memory. If you're seeing that memory warning in your job logs a lot, that's definitely the first place I'd look at to scale. The second would be disk space, just making sure you have enough disk space on your machine, especially if we're eating up your memory. We're going to go for your disk space next. So make sure that you have plenty on that machine. One area where you probably won't need to scale is your CPUs. We typically say you want one CPU per engine and one CPU for everything else within FME server. So that means we probably won't use, or pretty much won't ever use, more than one CPU per engine. So that's some place where you can kind of skimp out on, and you don't need those extra CPUs to run FME server. We do have our standard tech specs linked here. Please note this is for kind of like a small installation of FME. Typically, I see users wanting more memory than our tech specs do say. Finally, I'll talk about managing resources. So something you might want to think about with your FME server installation is where to upload data to. Some people upload directly to the FME server data folders. And now this can be useful because if your engines are on the same machine as your FME server file share, things tend to run quickly because the data is right there. We have easy access to it. However, some people might want to upload to their network drive. It's important as an organization to kind of have an agreement of where that data will be stored. Considerations of where to upload your data. So I mentioned this already, but the network topology between where your engine is and where your data is stored is super important. Also, where your database is. You want to make sure those things are close together. But it's also important to note that if you have everything stored on the FME server machine in the database or in the data folders, if you take a backup, we're going to back up all that data too. So this could lead to some large backup files that take a long time to process. So it's just something to note when deciding where to store your data. As well, you need to think about permissions on the server and who has access to what. Some things I see a lot of are people not wanting, or server admins not wanting users to have access to create new database connections and stuff like that. So just all important things to note. Finally, last but certainly not least, we have security. Things you can do on FME server. You can have reset password. So if you have email enabled on your server, users can go in and reset the password themselves. We also have password policies enabled. So you can make sure that your organization is using a password policy on your FME server. As well, we have Active Directories, SAML, and you can configure for HTTPS. Now, when in doubt, please reach out to us. We have a lot of links here. I'll just point out a few. So the FME Academy, make sure that you check out the data integration best practices. This will go into the things that we've talked about in this talk into much more detail. As well, the best practices for IT ops and FME server admins. That's a great article that goes into details about the same stuff.
Awesome. And it does look like we have some time remaining here for Q&A. And I believe Chris has something to share out to get us started here as well.
Yeah, so one of our colleagues, Mark Ireland, actually started a best practices, we'll say, community group for the FME community. So he kind of started a Google Doc and that community group for users around the world, partners and safers alike, to all share their best practices in this one document. So I'm just going to chat that out. Feel free to, I'll put that in the chat here. Feel free to join that, add your own tips and tricks. And yeah, it's a great little resource that has a lot of new tips as of October 24th, 2022. So a relatively new concept here, but something that we're all really excited about. And there's a link to a Google Doc that's actually in the first paragraph. So that's where you can actually add your tips if you don't want to add comments there.
As well, we do have one question that hasn't been answered yet. And the question is there any way to determine the amount of extra hard drive space we need to consider for FME server? Any metrics or best practices? So according to our tech specs, they ask for at least 20 gigabytes of disk space on FME server. So that's kind of like at a minimum. You might want more if you're uploading data directly to that FME server. You want to make sure you have room for all that data. Also, if you're finding you're having memory constraints on the FME server, if we use up all that memory, we will start caching things to your disk space. So you might want more in that case as well. I honestly rarely hear about people having issues with their disk space. Typically, it's always memory issues. So go for memory first if you're looking to upgrade is basically the answer there. But 20 gigs should be enough for the extras.
Awesome. I also just noticed that there is also one more best practices resource available. One of our colleagues, Liz, put this together. So there's actually an FME Platform best practices document on our FME community as well. So on the articles page. So this is more of a tutorial series article. So it's not really interactive where you're adding your own tips, but you can find a lot of great information of where to find documentation, tips for personalizing the authoring experience, as well as going into the server side of things as well. So a lot of great tips on that. And I just sent that out in the chat.
Excellent. And I will note here as well, we do have a community badge code to redeem as a thank you for watching today. So I'll chat that out there. If you aren't a part of the FME community, definitely check it out. It's a great place to network with other FME users alike.
All right, it looks like we have another question as well from Adam. So if we have an SDE and a handful of large data sets that we call frequently across multiple workbenches, would it be a good idea to cache that data to FME server rather than making separate calls for each run? I'm pretty sure the answer here is that there's not really a way you can cache the data on the FME server. So unless you'd be like writing them as local file geodatabases, kind of data dumps from the database, I don't think there'd really be a way to do that. Sienna, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, typically we recommend, there's an article on this where it's like, let the database do the work. In general, databases will be faster than our native processing in FME. So if you could kind of push most of that work onto the database instead of having FME do it, that's the best idea. Caching would be like doing your own local copy. And I guess it really depends on the what your network topology looks like. If your engine is very close to wherever that database is, it's likely going to be faster than if you stored it locally on your FME server. But that's a good thing to test out and let us know if that works or not.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, Sienna was mentioning utilizing the where clauses in most of the database writers. So the SDE reader should have that as well. That's where going to allow the database to cut down the number of features that are actually going to be read into the workspace. The same would go for a server job as well. It'll help with the performance with fewer features going in there, obviously. A similar consideration for performance is the number of attributes that you're bringing in as well. So typically the two things, one would be how many features are coming in, features or records, and then attributes or columns in the data set would also have another performance consideration there.
Awesome. Any other questions there we haven't addressed yet before we wrap up today? Looks like we've gotten to them all. Folks, if you do have any questions that come up, even after we've gone offline here, we'll stay online for a couple minutes here and try to get to any last minute questions that we can as well. And if you do think of anything after the webinar, definitely reach out to us, info@safe.com. We're happy to chat about anything data with you all. And thank you for the info about the webinar badge. I will hold on to that error code there and get that resolved shortly. So if you can save that code, and we should be able to help you get that redeemed in the next couple of days here. So thanks for your patience on that. If you do have a moment to fill out the webinar survey, we really appreciate any feedback. I did just put that link in the chat. It's just a few multiple choice questions there. And a huge thank you to our presenters, Sienna and Chris. Thanks for joining today and for your help with this live Q&A. Hope you all have a great rest of your day today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining.
Bye for now, everyone.